thinking differently and finding unique solutions to problems is really what disruption's about. And I often talk about how people think that the world is sort of a status quo, that it's one seamless, level of events or occurrences. But the reality of it is, I believe that there are seams, like faults in that continuum. And as a result of that, up from those seams comes a disruption. It comes out of, as we travel during the status quo, we travel along the journey, there are places where from underneath, as we unearth things, that the disruption comes. And so I feel like I've been sort of doing that my whole life. I was a sports person at a time where there's no Title IX in this country. Right. So, I couldn't play Little League or do those things. My father took me and fought with me fought for me to be able to do those things. And, now today it's a very big business even.
I'm interested in that concept you talk about with the status quo, because status quo is almost a translation of, but we've always done it that way. I'm interested in this theory about seams. I've never heard that put that way. I love that idea. So you're going along a journey and suddenly you think, oh, what's there? And you feel like this weakness, this stitch glued together. I wonder what's under there. And that's coming back to something you clearly say frequently, and it's probably the number one word I use in my business, the word curiosity. I'm curious about what's under that seam. And suddenly this stuff gets unearthed. Exactly.
And that's really, I believe, how that happens. And certainly as I have done those things in my younger years, and even now in my company, how I founded the company was all about that. Was like, what's under here? And everyone said to me, oh, kids with autism, they have sensory things, and that's why it looks this way. I'm like, no, I don't think so.
I want to know more.
I don't think that's right. Yeah. I want to understand. It doesn't make sense to me. And I think that, there are certain things that make sense, but it's always difficult for me to understand when someone says, oh, it's this, when the rest of it doesn't fit. It's like a puzzle, right? That piece doesn't fit. It might look okay there, but it doesn't fit.
I think the other word you use a lot, again, it's something which all leaders use, and that is the word tenacity. So when you were talking about, I'm trying to understand the patterns of autism, and I couldn't find any patterns. And until eventually the tenacity said, but it's got to be somewhere. I've got to keep looking. And I guess when you speak to some people, and you just made reference to it when they say, no, it's that, the piece sits there. And people are happy and content because it's almost too hard to find the problem. There isn't the purpose. There isn't the drive, the desire. Therefore, they just say, let's just leave it alone. I've decided the answer. I've decided I'm content with that. But then they're not driven to solve the problem. And I guess that's where entrepreneurialism comes alive.
Right. That's right. And that's what leadership is. People think about leadership as someone in government ruling the country, or someone with a flag leading people on a trip. But the reality is that leadership is all about solving problems. And if you can help solve problems, then you are a leader. And I think people don't think of leadership that way, but that's really what it's about, solving problems.
I'm always curious about why I think what I think sometimes, and I sort of reflect and challenge. And I guess when you're children, that when they're at that age of sort of 3, 4, 5, 6, before they go to school, all they're saying is, yeah, but why? Yeah, but why? There is this incredible curiosity around kids. And yet as you go through the educational system and you be exposed to, adults, and we're all wired for this sort of different behaviors, that suddenly that curiosity is constrained. It's sort of wired out of us. And therefore it's only those that have got that, I guess, entrepreneurial desire, disruptive desire, that maintain that curiosity. But so many it seems like we're dragging the curiosity out of kids. We're saying, no, it just is what it is. Stop asking questions.
Right. It's, the educational system ends up being about feeding information, right? It's a feeding, they need to have this information. But I always say, when young people say to me, if you had one thing to teach me about what you've learned in your life, what would you say? And I always say the same thing. Information does not equal knowledge, and knowledge does not equal wisdom. And just because you have all this information doesn't mean that you're going to be really good at using it or applying it. And so I think that the young people think because they have all this information at their fingertips, that they'll know how to use it wisely. And they just don't all the time.
No, that comes back down to tenacity. Why? I've written an article on LinkedIn a few days ago, and it was about how the average leader or the average human being makes 35,000 decisions a day. And it's created an incredible debate, which I knew it would, because the problem we've got is we're all consumed with data coming out of every angle, every orifice. There's data everywhere. And there's arguments one way that says, well, the data is not rich enough. There's other arguments that says there's too much data. And there's all these explanations that people are trying to fit the square peg in the round hole. And the reality is, how do you decide what data is important? Just because you have it doesn't mean it's relevant. And therefore, it's about how do you truly get to the nub of what problem you're trying to solve. The key to life is knowing the right question to ask.
Always. First of all, you can't collect the right data without knowing what question to ask. And if you don't have the experience, you got all these data guys trying to collect information, some of which is erroneous and it will give you a fallacy. But I go back to the original scientific inquiry or the original learning kind of inquiry. There's inductive reasoning and there's deductive reasoning. We have defaulted everything to an inductive model. Information, and that will lead you to a conclusion. If you have too much data, it's not going to get you there. You're going to make a lot of noise. If you have too little data, you're going to miss something, right? And so a combination of deductive and inductive is much better. But we've sort of defaulted to the one model. Even in our healthcare system, it's all inductive. Allopathic medicine is inductive, and you can make a mistake if you don't look at the right thing.